The quiet of space was shattered as a fleet of colossal alien warships appeared on the edge of Earth's solar system. The Orcan had arrived, their ships dark and imposing, hanging in the void like ancient metallic giants. These beings had long traveled the stars, conquering worlds one by one. Their race, known for its advanced technology and unyielding will, had never been defeated. Earth, however, was about to learn the cost of their arrogance. On board the Earth warship Defiant, Captain Ethan Rhodes watched the holographic projection of the alien fleet. The size of the approaching armada was enough to make anyone's heart race, even a seasoned officer like him. Still, there was something about this situation that felt different. Humanity wasn't supposed to be here. Their world was small, their resources limited, and their technology young compared to the rest of the galaxy. Yet, the Orcan were making a mistake, one that would soon prove fatal. As Rhodes stood at the command center, feeling the weight of this realization, he couldn't shake off a strange sense of anticipation. "Captain, they're scanning our systems," said Lieutenant Kara, her voice tense. The ship's sensors hummed, with activity as the pulse from the alien fleet washed over the Defiant. The warship shuddered slightly under the pressure, but the ship's defensive shields held firm, protecting the heart of humanity's most advanced vessel. Rhodes narrowed his eyes, watching the display as the Orcan's scans swept across their ship, searching for any weakness, any vulnerability. The alien response came just a few moments later. A voice, cold and emotionless, broke through the comm system. It was unlike any human voice. There was no warmth, no trace of understanding. It was pure logic, detached and final. "Submission is inevitable. Resistance is futile. Surrender now, and we will be merciful." The words hung in the air like an unbearable weight, filling the room with an eerie silence. The message was delivered, telepathically, direct and to the point, as though the Orcan had already seen Earth's future and determined its fate. It was a chilling declaration, one that implied the absolute certainty of their victory. Their superiority was unquestionable. They had conquered countless worlds, and Earth, in their eyes, would be no different. Rhodes stood still, his hands resting on the edge of the control panel. His mind raced. How could these aliens think they could just come to Earth and dictate terms? He knew humanity's history of defiance and resilience. He had seen it firsthand in countless wars, in the struggle to survive on Earth, and he knew that the Orcan were about to make a terrible mistake. "Do we respond, sir?" Kara asked, her voice breaking the silence. Her eyes were locked on the screen, her fingers hovering over the console. There was a tension in the air now, as though even the ship itself was holding its breath, waiting for a command that could change everything. Rhodes didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced over at the rest of the crew. They were all looking at him, eyes filled with determination, yet tinged with the weight of uncertainty. The Orcan had come to conquer. They had come to wipe out anything standing in their path. But there was something the Orcan hadn't counted on. It wasn't just technology or firepower. It was humanity's spirit. He turned back to the holographic map, the alien fleet now looming just beyond the moon's orbit. They were preparing for the next move, but so were they. Rhodes's fingers moved across the control panel, sending a single signal. It wasn't much, just a small ripple in the sea of stars, but it was enough to tell the aliens one thing. Earth wasn't ready to give up. The Defiant's engines hummed to life, readying itself for the fight ahead. "Prepare for battle," Rhodes finally said, his voice calm but steady. "Humanity doesn't surrender. We never have." The crew of the Defiant moved into action, their nerves steeled and their resolve strengthened. The Orcan may have thought they had Earth figured out, but they had no idea what they were about to face. What they didn't know was that the human spirit was not so easily crushed. This fight was just beginning, and the aliens had underestimated what they were up against. The Defiant would prove that the story of humanity was far from over. In fact, it was just about to begin. Supreme Commander Krathor stood at the command console aboard the Orcan flagship, his icy gaze fixed on the data scrolling across the display. The scans of Earth's warship, the Defiant, had been completed, and what he saw caused his mandibles to twitch in rare, uncertain tension. The Orcan had encountered many species across the galaxy, species with technologies that were either superior or primitive, with systems that were easy to understand and predict. Yet, this was something else. The Defiant was a puzzle, one the Orcan had not expected to encounter. The data revealed that the ship was far more advanced than Earth should have been capable of creating. On the surface, it appeared crude, primitive, a product of a young, inexperienced race. But the deeper Krathor delved into the scan results, the more unsettled he became. There was a raw, untamed energy radiating from the Defiant, a pulse that felt almost unnatural. It was not simply an advanced weapon system or even a fusion reactor. The ship's core was pulsing with something Krathor could not immediately comprehend. To the Orcan, this was more than just a warship. It was a force of nature. As he focused on the systems aboard the Defiant, the true nature of its power became clear. The ship was armed with hundreds of advanced weapon systems, many of which were similar to the weapons the Orcan had seen in their conquests across the stars. But then, there were others, systems that made Krathor's mind race. These weapons were unlike anything the Orcan had ever developed or even dreamed of. A neural network so sophisticated that it was capable of reprogramming the ship's core functions in real time. A propulsion system capable of faster-than-light travel, a technology the Orcan had only mastered after millennia of experimentation. And defensive shields that were far beyond their theoretical understanding of energy manipulation. But these were not the most unsettling discoveries. As Krathor continued his analysis, he began to sense something beyond mere technology. A strange primal force seemed to emanate from the Defiant's core, a kind of energy that defied logic and calculation. It was as if the ship itself had a soul, a raw willpower that pulsed like the heartbeat of an ancient creature. The Orcan were a race of cold logic, born of calculation and precision, and they understood power in terms of cold, hard science. But what they saw here wasn't just science, it was something they could not quantify. It felt alive. And this made Krathor uneasy in a way he had never experienced. He turned from the console and paced before his command seat, his mind racing through every war they had won, every enemy they had crushed. The Orcan had conquered entire star systems, dismantled fleets far more advanced than Earth's, and wiped out species that had once thought themselves invincible. But there was something different about this warship. It was more than just an anomaly. This ship, this Defiant, represented something much deeper, a testament to humanity's potential, to a power that had yet to be fully realized. A creeping dread began to worm its way into Krathor's thoughts. The Orcan had made a critical mistake. They had believed that humanity was just another weak, primitive species, unworthy of much consideration. The Defiant was nothing short of a revelation. It wasn't just advanced technology, it was a symbol of humanity's untapped strength. This was a race that had survived wars, environmental collapse, and countless challenges on a single planet, and now they were facing the stars with something more than technology. They were facing their own hidden power, and the Orcan had miscalculated the scope of that potential. Krathor stopped pacing, his mind now focused on a single thought. Perhaps we have underestimated them. The realization hit him like a cold wave. The Orcan had studied countless species, calculated every possible outcome, and destroyed civilizations with ease. But there was something about humanity, something intangible, that had slipped through their analysis. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a battle against a force that they couldn't yet understand. And in that moment, Krathor, knew one thing for certain. The Orcan were not as invincible as they had believed. With a sharp motion, Krathor signaled to his officers, his voice steady but filled with a quiet urgency. Prepare for an engagement unlike any we've faced. This is no ordinary species. The warship Defiant is only the beginning. We must reconsider our strategy. The future of the Orcan, it seemed, was not as secure as it once was. The true nature of humanity was only beginning to unfold, and with it, the Orcan's impending ruin. Captain Rhodes stood at the front of the Defiant's mess hall, the low hum of the ship's engines filling the background as he watched the crew settle into their seats. The walls, once familiar and comforting, now felt cold and oppressive. The Orcan were coming. Their overwhelming fleet was almost upon them. And yet, despite the fear that might have taken hold of lesser crews, there was a quiet resolve in the air. Earth had never been a planet of conquerors. Humanity had never marched across the stars with the intention of subjugating other races. But what humanity lacked in sheer might, it made up for with something far more dangerous: the ability to survive. The Orcan had made the mistake of scanning the Defiant and measuring the ship's technology. They had scanned its weapons, its engines, its defenses. But what they hadn't counted on was the human spirit, the heart and determination that ran deeper than any technology ever could. This was humanity's greatest strength, and it was something no alien fleet could predict. Rhodes cleared his throat, his voice steady, though the weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily on his chest. "We are not here because we are the strongest," he began, his eyes meeting each of his crew members. "We are here because we refuse to be broken. The Orcan think they understand us. They think they've seen it all. But they don't know who we are. They've scanned our ship, but they haven't scanned our hearts. That's what makes us different. That's what gives us the edge in this fight. And that's why they're about to make a very big mistake." The crew exchanged looks of quiet confidence. They had fought wars on Earth, survived against overwhelming odds. Now, they had to bring that same spirit to the stars. Rhodes paused for a moment, letting his words sink in. Then he continued, "We have a weapon they won't expect." He turned toward a large screen on the wall, which flickered to life, showing a detailed diagram of the Defiant. Deep within this ship, hidden beneath layers of armor and technology, is the Aegis Protocol, a series of enhancements designed to give us a fighting chance in the face of total annihilation. It's a last resort, but it's our best shot. Murmur spread across the room, eyes widening in curiosity. The Aegis Protocol had been kept secret, a measure of last hope that had never been tested. But Rhodes knew this was the moment to reveal it. The crew needed to know the stakes. They needed to understand that what came next was not just about surviving. It was about proving that humanity could not be wiped out by any force, no matter how powerful. Rhodes continued, outlining the details of the final phase of the Aegis Protocol. This phase combines everything humanity knows about survival and warfare with technologies we've barely begun to understand: quantum technology, experimental energy systems, and neural networks that will allow the Defiant to react in real time to enemy actions. It's risky, and it might not work. But if we don't take this chance, we'll be wiped out before we even have a chance to fight back. The room fell silent. There was no turning back now. The Orcan were coming, and Earth's only hope was to gamble everything on this one weapon, this one last chance. There was no room for hesitation. Every crew member understood the gravity of the situation. They weren't just fighting for their lives, they were fighting for humanity's future, for the very soul of Earth. "We don't know if the Aegis Protocol will work," Rhodes said, his voice lowering slightly. "But I do know one thing. If we fight with everything we have, we'll show the Orcan that humanity doesn't just survive. We adapt, we fight, and we win." This is not just about technology. This is about proving that no matter the odds, we never back down. They think they're going to win. Let's show them just how wrong they are. A fire seemed to ignite in the crew's eyes. Their faces, once filled with doubt and fear, were now filled with something else: determination. Each person on board the Defiant understood the weight of what was to come. The Orcan were powerful, but they had underestimated humanity. Earth was not a planet of conquerors, but it was a planet that knew how to fight, to endure, and to rise from the ashes when all seemed lost. Rhodes turned away from the crew, glancing at the holographic map that displayed the Orcan fleet closing in. "Prepare yourselves," he said, his voice steady once more. "We fight as humans have always fought, not with the weapons of the strongest, but with the hearts of the bravest." The Defiant's crew moved into action, knowing that the fate of their world rested not in the cold calculations of the Orcan, but in the fiery spirit of humanity itself. And as the alien ships drew closer, they knew one thing for certain: they would not go down without a fight. The Aegis Protocol might be humanity's last hope, but the human spirit was the weapon that would carry them through. The Orcan fleet loomed large, a mass of metal and might that seemed to blot out the stars. Their ships, enormous and intimidating, approached Earth's forces with the deliberate certainty of a predator about to pounce on its prey. On the Defiant, Captain Rhodes stood at the helm, watching the massive holographic map as the alien ships closed in. Every officer on the bridge knew what was coming. This was no longer a question of whether Earth would survive. It was about whether humanity could stand tall against the unstoppable force of the Orcan. The odds were stacked against them, but as Rhodes glanced at his crew, he saw only determination. The time for fear was over. They would fight, and they would fight with everything they had. As the fleets faced off, Earth's warships took formation around the Defiant. The remaining ships of Earth's fleet, though outclassed in numbers and firepower, had been rapidly upgraded, with the latest in Earth's evolving technology. They may not have been able to match the Orcan in sheer might, but they were equipped with the most advanced systems humanity could muster. The Defiant was the spearhead of that defense, its dark hull gleaming ominously as it stood at the center of the formation. For a moment, there was nothing but silence, a silence that felt like the calm before the storm. And then, the silence shattered. The first shots were fired. A flash of blinding energy lit up the dark expanse of space as the Orcan ships unleashed their first barrage, their weapons designed to obliterate anything in their path. Yet despite the overwhelming force of the attack, something unexpected happened. The Defiant's shields flared to life, absorbing the energy with surprising efficiency, holding strong against the storm of incoming blasts. The alien ships had expected their bombardment to cripple Earth's defenses in moments, but humanity's last-minute preparations had proven to be more effective than the Orcan could have imagined. But it wasn't just the shields that caught the Orcan off guard. What came next was even more unexpected. As the Defiant absorbed the energy, its systems shifted into overdrive. Captain Rhodes had known this would be a key tactic, redirecting power from non-essential systems to maximize the efficiency of the ship's defenses and weapons. The Defiant did not just take the hits, it adapted. The ship's engines hummed as energy was rerouted, and with a sudden, violent burst, it launched a devastating counterattack. The Orcan had expected the Defiant to be a stationary target, a fragile ship just waiting to be destroyed. What they hadn't prepared for was the ship's ability to fight back with as much force as it took. The Orcan commanders, watching the unfolding battle from their flagship, quickly realized their initial plan was failing. Earth's warships, though outgunned, were not retreating or crumbling as the Orcan had expected. Instead, they were fighting with precision, executing strikes that left the alien ships reeling. The Defiant moved with incredible agility, dodging incoming blasts and returning fire with pinpoint accuracy. The Orcan's standard tactics, Laser bombardments, ion blasts, shockwaves were no longer as effective. The Earth fleet was proving a far more elusive target than the Orkan had anticipated. The alien ships began to stagger under the relentless assault, their commanders struggling to adapt to the unexpected resistance. Inside the Defiant, the crew worked seamlessly together, their coordination a perfect reflection of humanity's greatest asset: adaptability. The officers and crew, each fully aware of the stakes, moved quickly and decisively, executing maneuvers and counterattacks with a level of precision that the Orkan had never encountered. As each strike landed on the alien ships, the tension in the air grew. The Orkan had expected to find a world unprepared, an easy conquest. Instead, they had found humanity fighting for its survival with every ounce of strength it had. Captain Rhodes stood at the helm, his hand steady on the controls. The bridge was alive with activity, officers barking commands, systems lighting up with each new tactical readout. The battle was far from won, but the first signs of hope had emerged. Humanity's technology, though still primitive in comparison, to the Orkans, was starting to prove itself in ways the aliens could not have foreseen. It wasn't just about the Defiant's weapons or shields. It was the way the crew adapted to every new challenge, learning and evolving on the fly. The Orkan fleet, once confident in their superiority, was beginning to falter. They had underestimated humanity's resolve, its ability to fight with everything it had. The first clash had shown them one thing: humanity was not going down without a fight. In the vast emptiness of space, amidst the flashing lights and exploding ships, the Orkan were beginning to realize the true nature of their enemy. And in that moment, Captain Rhodes knew that humanity had done something the Orkan had never expected. It had shown them that it could fight on its own terms. The battle for Earth was just beginning, and the Orkan were learning that they might have underestimated their adversary more than they could have imagined. Commander Krathor stood in the command center of the Orkan flagship, his eyes narrowing as he watched the unfolding disaster. The chaos was palpable. Despite their overwhelming technological superiority, the Orkan fleet was beginning to show signs of distress. Ships that had once been invincible were now struggling, vulnerable in ways that Krathor could not have predicted. The Defiant had unleashed a strategic EMP pulse, a simple yet devastating move that had temporarily disabled several key ships within their formation. For a brief moment, the alien fleet was thrown into disarray, and Krathor could see it clearly: an opening, a crack in their perfect armor. The Defiant had taken a risk, and it had paid off. The ship's AI, designed to learn and adapt at an astonishing rate, had quickly analyzed the Orkan fleet's weaknesses and begun to exploit them with ruthless efficiency. The Orkan, who had conquered countless worlds with their advanced tactics and technology, were now scrambling to counter the Defiant's unpredictable strategies. It was a blow that cut deep into Krathor's confidence. How had they missed this? The Orkan had encountered countless species, had wiped out civilizations far more advanced than Earth. They were masters of war, with a cold, calculated approach to battle that had never failed them. But now, in the vast emptiness of space, they were facing something entirely new. They were facing a species that refused to bend, that adapted and fought with a relentless willpower that the Orkan had never encountered. Krathor clenched his fists, trying to maintain his composure. This was not supposed to happen. They had thought Earth's forces would break easily, but instead, they had proven themselves to be far more resourceful than the Orkan had imagined. The losses were mounting. The fleet was losing ships faster than they had anticipated. The Defiant's ability to disrupt their systems, to take advantage of every weakness, was forcing the Orkan into a corner. On the ground, Earth's forces were preparing for the inevitable invasion. Krathor knew the next phase of the battle was nearing. He had expected Earth's resistance to crumble once their ships fell, but there was something different in the air now. The human spirit, it seemed, was not so easily extinguished. Krathor could see it in the way the Defiant fought. Each maneuver was purposeful, a statement of defiance. The Orcan had come to conquer, but what they had found was a species that would never surrender, no matter the odds. The ground forces of Earth were ready for the fight, fully prepared to defend their world at any cost. Yet, in the back of Krathor's mind, a gnawing thought crept in. Even if they lost the battle in space, humanity had already won. They had proven to the Orcan that they were not weak, not fragile. They had shown the universe that Earth was a force to be reckoned with. Krathor's mind raced as he watched his fleet struggle to regain control. The realization hit him like a lightning bolt. The Orcan had always considered themselves the apex predators of the galaxy, the undisputed masters of war. But now, as he watched Earth's unyielding fight, the truth began to sink in. The Orcan were no longer the apex. This species, this human race, had the potential to change everything. The Orcan were no longer the ones in control of their fate. For the first time in Krathor's long life, he felt the cold touch of fear creep into his chest. What if Earth's ingenuity, its relentless drive, was the key to something far greater than the Orcan had ever known? The Defiant continued its assault, and with every strike, Krathor's resolve began to crack. He was not used to being outmaneuvered. He was not used to losing. Yet the data was undeniable. His fleet was being pushed to its limits, while Earth's fleet, despite being vastly outnumbered, was holding strong. The tides of war were beginning to shift. The Orcan had always believed they were unstoppable. They had believed the galaxy would bend to their will. But now, humanity was proving them wrong. It was as if fate itself had begun to change direction, as if the universe had decided that the time for the Orcan to reign had passed. Krathor's thoughts were a whirlwind of frustration and realization. This was more than just a battle for Earth. This was a battle for the future of the galaxy, and the Orcan were no longer the dominant force they had once been. They had underestimated humanity, and in doing so, had sealed their own fate. The QR war was far from over, but the shift in power was already in motion. Humanity had made its mark. Krathor's eyes narrowed in grim determination. They would fight to the end, but now he understood. The Orcan were no longer the apex predators of the galaxy. Humanity's time had come, and the Orcan would have to learn to live in a universe where they were no longer the masters. The tides of fate had shifted. The war was far from over, but one thing was certain. Humanity would never bow down to anyone. Not now, not ever.